We pulled into the viewing area after midnight, where the signs promised mystery and the asphalt promised nothing at all tonight. The coin viewer wore dewlock freckles. The low desert made a single dark sentence, and the wind forgot every comforting word. Sam killed the engine, and the silence arrived with a weight my ribs refused, like a seatbelt locking before impact. Out past the fence, 3 lights lifted from the chaparral and hung in a half circle. Curious as dogs, but careful about distance. They were not headlights, not drones, not the cruel stars that never change. And they pressed the air without sharing any heat. A family at the food truck laughed too loud, then swallowed the sound together. The way strangers cooperate without ever meeting eyes. Sam said we should whistle once because humans fall in love with buttons, even when buttons do not claim to be buttons. I said, do not line up the flashlights because lines teach things, and things that learn become problems no road shoulder solves. He grinned the grin that always lands us at fences, then set to beams parallel on the sand, like runways, no plane requests. The lights closed to measured steps, brightened a fraction, and waited as if manners were their first language and our second. Sam raised his beam shoulder high, and the space between us and the arroyo condensed, like distance, folding to meet expectation politely. We took a cautious step, and the air pushed against our shins with politeness that still felt like pressure, the way crowds negotiate. The dry arroyo showed a spine of flat rocks that had not been there when we parked beside the polite food truck. The stones glowed the gray of breath held too long, and each looked sanded by years of feet that never lived here. We crossed in single file because bodies know when single file is the only shape that pleases something older than asphalt. On the far bank, a staircase of stone rose through brittlebush, edges wet with a do-know weather report claimed tonight. I know park maps, ranger mailers, and the volunteer who collects stories with care, and these steps live in none of them. Sam said this could be a guided tour some bored county worker built for credulous people like me, then laughed without finishing the laugh. I said, keep your light down because beams happen to be leashes. And he lowered his light and let the staircase retreat politely. He raised it again, and the staircase shortened to 5 patient strides, which is exactly the number pride prefers before trouble begins. The 3 lights remained in a gentle arc behind us, nudging air, shepherding without touch, like good dogs, never crossing an unfriendly threshold. I counted backwards from 15 to test an instinct, and they dimmed slightly, as if numbers offended a grammar they had built. Sam whispered that we should hurry and see the top before the joke ended, because jokes rarely last past midnight without payment demanded. We climbed, and cold iron smell joined the air, like a skillet forgotten in winter, or tools left under snow by a careful hand. At a landing, the smallest light leaned toward the whistle hanging from my lanyard and brightened, then dimmed the way noses greet politely. I palmed the whistle because some invitations should be written, not played, and the light withdrew with the patience of a squeacha. We tried lowering both beams to shin level, and the steps unspooled downward until distances again agreed with the ordinary language of legs. When we lifted them together, the last riser lifted closer, as if gravity had decided to honor our enthusiasm at a fair price. A cough drifted from the lot, then failed to become a voice, and a generator pretended to exist long enough to reassure nobody. The lights herded us sideways along the slope, never crossing the dry wash now below. never passing between us with rudeness, never enlarging shadows improperly. At a second landing, the stairway stopped at a ridge cut, ending in brush that threw back our light like silver confetti. I turned to thank nothing in particular, and the smallest light pulsed once, then drifted toward the wash like a fish considering shallows. We counted down slowly and kept the beams low, and the little procession followed rules we had not signed but agreed to honor. At the arroyo, the glowing ribs dulled to ordinary stones, mean to ankles, unhelpful to dignity, grateful to be useless again. On the far bank, the lights held, unwilling to cross even a pretend trickle, as if stream beds kept treaties not written by any county. Back at the fence, the family had gone, the truck shuttered, and the viewer fogged with tiny perfect circles where faces had searched. Sam said we should come back tomorrow and prove this was nothing at all, because daylight kills theater when it can reach the stage. Morning made the desert harsh and honest, and still the stone risers held a slick soot crescent near the second landing, fresh as apology. A ranger in a clean hat checked her clipboard, frowned politely at the steps, and told me maps change slower than rocks, but faster than stories. That night, Sam sent me the footage with a caption that was only our names and the time, like a receipt we never paid. On the video, our headlamps never move, though memory insists we raised, lowered, begged, and defied. Like children at a museum exhibit, the lights shift exactly where we remember, schooling through air, adjusting formation, pressing shins we cannot see, with a delicacy that humbles pride. Behind us, the staircase changes length between frames, as if distance were an actor adjusting marks when the director blinks to hide impatience. I keep the whistle in a drawer now, because drawers are where temptation goes when it wants to learn patience without attention. Sometimes, turning off the kitchen light, a bead of brightness hangs where my chest would be if I were taller, then politely vanishes. When I count backward in the hall before sleep, the space between numbers feels measured by something that enjoys counting the same direction. If you go, do not line up beams, because straight lines are leashes, and leashes always teach the wrong creature first. If 3 lights gather in a half circle, treat them like neighbors with better manners than yours, and a longer claim on the view. Let numbers be your apology, let water be your law, and keep every invitation small enough to carry back without asking for help. I met the lights on a Tuesday when freight ran light. The thermometer sulked, and my coffee tasted like it remembered better days. 3 orbs sat off the shoulder, where the pull-off breaks into caliche, arranged in a patient half-circle, neither approaching nor pretending not to notice. I flashed my highs once, because I am not as wise as my age should make me, and humans answer questions poorly. 3 pulses replied, clean, evenly spaced, like a metronome teaching the road a song that refuses to be catchy until suddenly unbearable. I answered with 3 again, and the shoulder line flickered as if heat rose from cold ground, then became a thin paved ramp. The ramp fed a return I have never seen on 90, narrow, unmarked, obedient. A private thought the highway briefly agreed to share. I took it without thinking, because drivers always choose shorter until shorter proves expensive, and headlights reward faith even when faith misplaces payment. Behind me, the orbs held position, unbothered, professional, like escorts who have learned to pretend they follow, when really everyone is agreeing together. The CB hiss disappeared entirely when the wheels touched the new asphalt, and I have never heard a radio be that happy silent. My dashboard clock lost 3 minutes and forgot to apologize. The way clocks behave when managers enter the room already disappointed. The return merged us back onto 90, ahead of a line I had sworn would trap me behind a camper craving romance. I laughed because victory lived in my throat, then swallowed. Because pride throws you back like a fish unless you learn gentler hooks. A mile later, the orbs slid into view again at the next pull-off. Half circle, patient, offering 3 pulses like a dealer with free samples. I tried 2 flashes for once, because men test fate with small lies before nearby bridges ever notice, and the orbs answered with 2. The streetlights staggered out in a wave ahead. A blackout ripple, you feel like a shrug from a sleeping giant reconsidering whether morning deserves effort. The shoulder hardened into another ramp, this one shorter, with a strip of fresh gravel like sugar pressed into the margins with rough hands. I took that too, because I wanted to believe useful miracles repeat, and repetition deserves respect when you drive for someone else's schedule. The CB hiss died again, the way silence becomes a platter where expensive things sit briefly, and my ears missed even useless noise. I rejoined 90 with time gained, not lost, like sin that invoices later, and my hands felt older than the rest of me. At the 3rd pull-off, the orbs made a half circle and pulsed once, then held, suggesting a rule I hadn't yet been taught. I gave 1 flash and waited, and a narrow viaduct rose ahead where the map has always kept only sand, wire, and throwaway sky. The truck took the approach gentle, and the shadow underneath felt heavier than shade, as if air considered charging extra to be lifted so rudely. On the other side, the road existed again, then remembered it shouldn't, then pretended we were talking about weather, which never forgives improvised small talk. My GPS drew a straight line across nothing in particular, then stabilized, then drew another, sulked, and finally agreed to display ordinary future like law-abiding software. The orbs kept pace at the margins like outriders, present only at the angle glass enjoys, never honest head-on, never humiliating in daylight. I tried to thank them, which is stupid language, and flashed thrice without thinking, and every lamp along 90 winked out in order like tired eyelids. The ramp refused to form, and the orbs held position like security guards waiting for an apology I could not phrase without admitting more. I muttered a prayer, because drivers collect them the way they collect receipts, and the orbs brightened once, then dimmed in agreement. The next ramp bloomed, and I took it, promising to never again test rhythms without permission, which is probably my most specific vow this year. At the truck stop, the cashier said cameras skipped during the storm that never came, and footage shows trucks ghosting past, unconnected to any weather. He rolled back tape for me, and my rig entered from a return that does not exist, at least not in any recorded version of Tuesday night. I walked the trailer with a flashlight that has earned trust, and dust lay across the rear doors like it needed to be believed carefully. Gravel powder covered the bumper where no gravel should stick after miles of lawful asphalt, and my thumb took a sample like a museum docent's. The orbs waited beyond the edge of the lot, where the highway remembers wrong shoulders, not moving, not asking, not even needing me particularly. I drove back out and promised to behave by answering exactly what I received, nothing more, and that is a humility the road appreciates reluctantly. 3 pulses arrived, and I answered 3, and a ramp appeared, and I took it, and the silence arrived, and I kept it precious. Ahead, the lights of town trembled like a person holding back questions, and the orbs dimmed until they resembled lies nobody needed to tell. I rejoined 90, where rejoining breaks hearts daily, and my clock restored 3 minutes without admitting the error, which is very like men and machines. Dawn found me before deliveries did, and the pull-offs looked like ordinary lost decisions, littered with wrappers and good intentions that missed their targets badly. The orbs live there sometimes, in the corner where sight pretends to get bored, and answer only rhythms that do not insult their patience. If you meet them, do not invent patterns, because invention costs extra, and roads always collect, even when receipts are printed on nothing at all tonight. The coin viewer at the overlook takes quarters with a stingy confidence, and still we fed it because humans love clocks with metal throats. The desert carried a black sheet to the horizon and tucked it under stones, and my breath fogged the eyepiece with obedient loyalty. I turned the dial left and right, and focus crisped on brush I could not see without the machine stealing distance kindly for a minute. Then a street appeared where chaparral belonged, a line of small lights moving in a curve like a river that forgot water but remembered traffic perfectly. I took my eye away, and the hillside was only hillside, a comb of darkness, no lights, no proof, no reason to keep my quarter. Sam laughed, the little laugh people laugh before fear finds new shoes, and he fed the viewer again because disbelief is expensive and addictive. I narrated softly what the glass showed, because narrators always misunderstand their power, and my mouth described an intersection blooming like a flower under alien sun. Below us, without the eyepiece, a single light winked into ordinary existence for exactly a breath, then went out like a polite apology. I said I was tired, and Sam said, "Describe more," and my tongue obeyed, because tongues enjoy new bridges even when bridges charge tolls. A row of storefronts lit themselves in the viewer with a color that remembered sodium but preferred the vocabulary of moonlight, repurposed by patient hands. Without the viewer, the hillside stayed black, but for a moment, a faint rectangular glow staged a window that nobody would admit later. Third quarter, because men decide 3s are respectable, and I hunted the river of lights again and found a station with roofline teeth. A train crossed the frame in perfect miniature, lights strung like punctuation, and my heart made the folly of assigning schedules to machines that never promised anything. When I pulled away, the rails belonged to rocks again, but a far metallic sound rolled over the lot with the weight of imagined wheels. I filmed through the eyepiece with my phone, and the video captured brush and nothing else. But the audio collected a clicking like deliberate footfalls. Sam swore gently, because anger wants obedience more than clarity, and he said, "Narrate exactly, and stop when he said stop," which is love disguised politely. I described a bridge in the viewer that cut the valley with silk wire, and a pickup below braked hard for no stated reason at all. For a second, the pickup's brake lights reflected against nothing with the certainty of red reflected on glass that refuses to be glass anywhere sensible tonight. Fourth quarter, because greed is a ladder with too many rungs missing. and I tilted the viewer toward the left edge where maps disclaim everything. The viewer showed the overlook itself from a few feet back, a composition I did not choose, with two people standing where we actually stood. One was me, the other was a third shape that leaned between us, taller, instrumentally calm, face not absent, but deliberately unbuilt by any supervising engineer. I pulled my eye back, and only the coin viewer stared, but damp footprints bloomed beside my shoe. Toes pointed toward the machine like gratitude. Sam said stop, and for once I obeyed immediately, because obedience earns interest. When machines borrow our futures and charge quietly at night, we stepped away, and the coin viewer clicked once without a quarter, a mechanical hiccup no technician would sign their name under proudly. It turned free for exactly 10 seconds, then stiffened like a hinge, remembering the importance of resisting strangers, and the valley became honest again. On the guardrail, condensation drew a tiny grid, the ghost of city blocks, where no county clerk will ever approve services like water or trash. The next night, without coins, from the road below, a square of lights flickered in the brush like a tired city trying stretching exercises. It lasted 3 seconds, none more, enough to become a story, even if we refused ownership, which is not a gift humans accept easily. I keep thinking the viewer steals distance in both directions, forward and back, and sometimes forgets to return everything it borrowed without receipts. If you pay, narrate nothing, because words are stairs, and stairs make places where only slopes should live, and slopes forgive faster than streets. If the machine shows you yourself, do not check with your eyes, because the bill always arrives when you finally do, and nobody carries change here. When the dial goes slack for 10 uncounted seconds, leave it slack and leave quietly, because generosity is expensive when metal throats learn courtesy. The desert has room for cities that do not need to feed anyone yet, and patience for people who insist on being first residents unwillingly.